right, here we are in Springerville, Arizona. I want you to note the sign, welcome to Springerville. And I'll tell you something, the people here make you feel just that way. You'll never find a place you'll be more welcome. The people will assist you in finding your way around. You know what? Near here you've got the petrified forest, the painted desert. But I think our rich Christian American heritage is also extremely important. And there's a wealth of it here in Springerville, Arizona. I want to introduce to you Mr. Garden Howe. Garden, how are you?
Fine.
And
Thanks.
I just wonder if you could give us a little information on the city and what you all are doing here.
Okay. Well, we're a small town, but pretty aggressive. I first came to town a couple of years ago with the mandate from the Economic Development Commission to find a way to make Springerville a tourism destination. And the way that we're doing that is we held a retreat and talked to all the people in town about what we have that other people don't have, and we came up with the Casa Malpais site. And we've gone through a lot of changes on the particular site, including names. It's been called Casa Malpais, Casa Malpais, and so forth. We finally settled on the name Casa Malpais, which is what the original Hispanic settlers called it. That means House of the Badlands. And we took a look at the site originally not really knowing what it was. It had only been explored twice at that point in time, first in 1911 and again in 1947. We found the man who explored it in 1947, and he shared with us the wonders of the site and talked to us a little bit about what it was and what could be done with it. Then we began to talk to the State Parks Department about it, and they gave us a couple of grants to develop and to plan for its development.
We're at the base of the archaeology site right now, and as you can see, we've come along a dirt road here, and we've got a couple of fences to cross through. As I said earlier, we're just at the very beginning of developing this site, and that's the real beauty of it. Anybody who comes here and looks at it now gets to see it in progress, and hopefully we can all come back in 10 or 15 years and see what we've made out of it. But it truly is a real community project, and we sure invite anybody who wants to come up here and be a part of that community. Looking out across the valley, you'll see one of the original settlements in this valley. It's called Fort Redondo. In the middle of that grove of ash trees out there is a stone fort that was developed for protection from the Apaches over 100 years ago. It was never used in that capacity. It was just built as a safeguard and never had to be used. The Apaches in the area basically came down to the top of the ridge and never came down into the valley for some reason or other. But we'll be walking up along this trail here onto the terraces. The geology of the area is unique in that this is one of the largest volcanic fields in the country. We have over 200 cinder cones right here at the north end of the White Mountains, and what's happened is that one of the cinder cones outside of town exploded several thousand years ago, and the lava flow from that flowed out in finger-like projections over an old floodplain that was created by the lake that was once northern Arizona. This photograph that you see is one of those finger-like projections of lava, and on the side of that you have terraces that are formed by the lava flow breaking up and splitting, like in the fingers of your outstretched hands. The lava has split and created fissures, and as you see here, it's slumped down to the side into the floodplain, and these fissures have formed hidden valleys and caves underneath this particular site. There's speculation. The archaeologists speculate that these terraces that you see right through here may possibly have been filled in by dirt carried from the floodplain. The site itself is quite rare and unique. Around here it was kind of tough to get people to realize how rare and unique it was because it was just the caves that the local people played in when they were children. And they all had a good time in those caves. Everybody knew about it. The folks that you see around town talk about the caves and what a good time they had in it. But they were just caves. They didn't quite realize that they were Indian ruins and artifacts that they were seeing in those caves. And there was even some talk that the various ceremonial plazas and kivas and such were created by the early Hispanics that came into the valley over 100 years ago. Not so, and we'll show you as we go on a tour of the site. exactly how they were created and what we think they were used for, but they date back to about 1300. We have one solid date of a tree ring at the site that was 1268, so that's about the time that the site was built. One of the things that we like about this site is the unique juxtaposition of the old and the new. We've got corrals down here that were used at the turn of the century for the cattlemen that worked this valley in this area, and the cow fence up here, and looking right over here we've got one of the first archaeological remains of this area, and this is who knows what. Is it an outpost? Is it a storage room? We don't know, but we do know that it was used prehistorically, and one of the ways that we know that is by virtue of the lichen that's on the rock. You see how the lichen is covered over the top of the rock. This particular kind of lichen takes several years, up to 500 years to grow, and if you look underneath the rock, where it's been placed up against another rock in this area, there's no lichen on it. So we know that these rocks have been placed in this position for at least that length of time, up to 500 years in some cases, or longer. So this is one of the first archaeological remains, and it looks like a pile of rocks. It starts to look like more as we wander up the trail, though. This terrace down here was used for agriculture, and we found remains of tiny corn cobs, beans, legumes, and we have to imagine that the valley was used for their water source. The site itself consists of several ceremonial plazas, a large pueblo. We know that there are 52 rooms there, and it's speculated there are as many as 120 rooms. One of the largest kivas, or religious ceremonial structures, in existence. Kivas typically in this part of the country are round. We have an unusual site here, and throughout this region there are several other unusual sites, I should say, in that the kivas are square. This one is constructed entirely out of basalt rock, or as they call it around here, Malpais. Let me distinguish right now between Malpais and Malpais. Malpais means bad country or bad lands. Malpais is just the name for the kind of rock. Bad rock, I guess. I don't quite know what that means. But at any rate, the site, Casa Malpais, is named after the badlands to the north on the mesa. And the architecture on the site is built from Malpais rock, or the basaltic, the columnar basalt that covers the area. Back-breaking work. The folks that lived at the site were 5 feet 4 inches tall. They covered these various structures that you see in the photograph here, and we'll get a better look at later. They covered those structures with pine logs from the forest that are 5 miles to the north. I'm sorry, that's 5 miles to the south, in this direction. They walked across the floodplain of the Little Colorado River carrying stone axes, cut those trees with those stone axes, put them over their shoulders, carried them back, and covered their kiva, which is about 40 feet, a 40-foot span. Absolutely fascinating, remarkably industrious people. They worked awfully hard to put together the kind of architecture that they put together here. One of the interesting things about this site are the unique types of architecture that are found here. We find a unique combination of different kinds of architecture, and this is one of them. As you see, we have a circular-shaped foundation. Jeff Brown's one of our graduate students that's working here at the site. Jeff, what can you tell us about this particular foundation?
As you can see, it's horseshoe-shaped with the entry right here. We believe the walls were probably 2 to 3 feet taller, and you can see another circular structure in the background. We also have an indication of a ramada-type structure on the back end where they might have done some work activity there. We'll know more about these two type structures when we do some test excavations. We're looking forward to doing that. That'll probably come in another couple weeks.
Another feature that you can see from this particular level is a boundary wall that you can see right up on top of this ridge. There are walls that virtually encircle the entire site, a fortification type wall. We know that the average height was about 5 feet 4 inches tall, a diminutive people. We know that there were about 800 of them that lived at the site at any given time.
We know that they occupied the site for about 150 years. One of the remarkable things about this site, however, is the fact that after that 150-year period, most of the folks in this area seem to have disappeared off the face of the earth. Now, they've been traced to a couple of different locations. We think that they may have gone to Zuni, which is in New Mexico, about 80 miles from here, and was the first Pueblo that we know about being established in the New Mexico area. We think that they may have also gone into Mexico. I don't have a map here, but if you visualize the Arizona-New Mexico border going south to New Mexico and create an inverted J, with us being in the inverted J part, going down to the mountains of Mexico, the Sierra Madres, that's the area that's defined by what we call the Mogollon culture. The other cultures that people are more familiar with in this area are the Anasazi, which is up in the Four Corners region, that is the region bounded by Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. Their culture experienced about the same thing, although at a little different time period. Those folks basically disappeared off the face of the earth at the same time. We don't quite know what happened. Was there a drought? Was there warfare? Was there economic and social collapse? Nobody really knows, but that's one of the things that makes this particular site very interesting to the archaeologists. They hope to find clues to that phenomenon in sites like this that span that time period. Okay, we're walking up to the top terrace now, and as you walk along and see the scene that the people who walked up here 700 years ago would have seen, you realize the kind of natural beauty and drama that the site encompasses. And you realize, I think, from seeing that, where they gained their religious inspiration. This saddle takes us to the top terrace of the site, and wonders in full unfold. This is the Great Kiva, and virtually goes without explanation. The remarkable stonework that went into this is mind-boggling. The amount of man-hours that went into constructing this and roofing it is just amazing. This is the dominating feature of the entire site. And I think any viewer can see for themselves why it's so special to us. Up in the other direction is the Pueblo site itself. The ground here is littered with rubble from the excavation of the Pueblo. All of this was dug out away from the Pueblo walls. And this is the Pueblo itself, or the living structure. Again, at this point in time, it looks a lot like a mound of earth, but you can see where the earth has been cleared away that there are actual walls with remarkable construction techniques in these walls. Look at the size of this particular rock, for instance. Absolutely huge rocks, combined with the smallest pebbles to make a virtually square, structurally sound wall like that you see in the kiva behind. This entire structure must have looked like that at one time. And looking at it brings to mind the pyramids of South America, Central America. Absolutely beautiful construction. One of the most interesting things about the site is the fact that we have an amateur archaeology program working here. This is virtually a pristine site. No one has ever worked it before. A few people have come in and dug potholes, but by and large, the archaeology of the area is intact, and we invite people from all over to get in touch with us and to come out and do archaeology in this brand new site. It's remarkably fascinating to people that are doing it. We have several volunteers here locally and a few paid staff, not too many paid staff, but a lot of volunteers that are working on it from the local area, and we have literally people from around the world that have come here to work on the site. One gentleman from England is particularly popular and done good work with us. But with a few days' notice, we can accommodate just about anybody who wants to come. short of thousands of people at one time, I have to assume. But we'd like to hear from people who are interested in working on archaeology. We'll teach you how to do the excavation. We'll let you get into the ground and do some digging and get your knees sore and get your hands dirty and get to work. And it's absolutely fascinating what you find at this particular site. It's very apparent that some of the rooms, anyway, were just up and left. We've completely excavated 2 rooms at this time. We found in one of those rooms 76 points, projectile points. We found bone jewelry. We found a weaver's kit, a full weaver's kit, indicating that some poor weaver's out there without his kit. We found a lot of pottery. If you want to move the camera right over here, I've got the entire display of the points in this particular case. At the site also, in this particular case, we have a Folsom point. The Folsom point is named after the site in New Mexico where this particular style of tool was found. And it dates back, the archaeologist may correct me on this, but I believe it dates back about 7,000 years, which indicates something fairly interesting too. These folks who lived here 700 years ago were also interested in the past. They collected the past. They found a point that dates back to a much earlier culture and collected it and had it in their home 700 years ago. Other things that have been found at the site so far include shell artifacts. I'm not sure you can get that from here, but in this particular case are some shell artifacts that are curved pieces of shell like this that have been carved out of a complete shell, a hole pierced in one end and used as ear ornaments. We also have many bone rings, and in this case too is a bone barrette that's been found to tie the hair back. Really intricate piece of bone. We found a lot of pottery. Most of the polychrome type pottery that we've found so far has been in many, many pieces, and we haven't yet been able to reconstruct a complete polychrome pot, but we found a tremendous amount of the utility ware, the corrugated pottery that was used extensively throughout this area. Okay, I'd like to show you some aspects of the museum while we're here. Let me just walk you through if I can. This is the lab area that we're moving into here. We've been in the display area, and we're moving back into the laboratory. What happens to artifacts as they come out of the site is that they're collected, bagged at the site, brought into the laboratory, and spread out on these tables that you see before you. Lots and lots and lots of potsherds, as you see over here. Here's one pot that's in the process of being reconstructed. As I said, we found a lot of the corrugated type pots, and you can kind of see why they call them corrugated. They look like corrugated cardboard, and this is the shape that we usually find them in, large potsherds. And this is a big pot that was found underneath the floor of one of the particular rooms that we dug. A pot like this typically would be used as a storage container for water or seeds, and they were buried in the floor to provide better integrity for the structure of the pot itself, as well as to keep the water cool. But this is kind of this is the shape that most of our artifacts are found in. As you can see, we have a real jumble of pottery. But just look at the fine work that goes into this. Look at the intricate lines in this particular piece of work. And you can see too that this, if you can see carefully enough, this has been glued together out of 3 potsherds. And that's the work of an archaeologist. You find the potsherd, you find out what it relates to, and you try to reconstruct it the best you can. And eventually, as in this bigger pot down here, you have a full vessel to work with. But the intricacy of the pot is something to see. You can tell by looking over all these artifacts, the many different designs that have been done, that we're dealing with a really complex culture and a fascinating group of artisans that worked on this site. Would have been really interesting to know some of them. But this is the work of archaeology. This is the pottery. The other things that come out are all bagged up and put into. It's like police work in many ways. You have evidence that has to be kept separate and has to be correlated with other evidence in other sites, so you can learn about what the larger culture had to do with. And that, of course, is how you learn to differentiate and identify the various cultures. In this area, we have 4 basic culture groups that we deal with. The Mogollon in this area, the Anasazi in the Four Corners region, the Hohokam in the Phoenix Valley area, characterized by large platform mounds and unique architecture and unique pottery, and the Salado culture that was in the Intermountain region between the Phoenix area and this part of the Arizona mountains. But this is all evidence. This is all evidence that tells us, that has clues about what happened in that particular culture and how they lived, how they thought, what they ate, how they worked. But one of the most interesting things about this particular site is the fact that we're working with community volunteers. This is really a community effort that has allowed this to happen. We've got a few people that are paid to work on the site, not too many. But this gentleman is scrubbing on pottery. This again is the work of an archaeologist, getting your hands in the water. Say hi, David.
Hi.
And as you can see, the pottery comes out of the ground. It's washed up and cleaned up. Everything here is labeled on the back. This hasn't been labeled yet. But it's labeled, placed into separate bags, identifying exactly where it came from. This young lady over here is painting and labeling the pottery. It's like an assembly line. We have a vast amount of evidence that's coming out of the ground at this particular site. And it's dried, numbered, placed into bags. At some point, all of this material becomes capable of becoming an exhibit in a museum. Here we have a large pot that was collected in this area and donated to us by one of our community volunteers. Several pots of exemplary of other areas in Arizona. Here we have the kind of material that comes out of our particular site. Again, the utility ware and several tiny points. We had some really good flint knappers that worked on this particular site. I think I mentioned that out of one room came 76 small points. And again, a full complement of manos and mataris. These are grinding stones used to grind the corn and the beans that came out of the site into meal. We know that corn and beans were raised on the site, on the terraced areas. Many of the things that I showed you in the museum are from this room. This is room number 17, I believe, of 52 that we've identified so far. And look at the remarkable construction of the walls. Absolutely tiny rocks fitted in together with other rocks of all sizes, and mortar was used in this. I'm standing on the original floor, and I'm actually standing on the area where a primitive craftsman had a loom and a weaving kit. This is where we found the weaver's kit. 76 tiny projectile points came out of this room. And over here we have the hearth. And for some odd reason that's unknown to us, we have a wall in between this particular room and an adjoining room. We believe that there was a doorway and a real jumble of rocks on the other side of this particular room. We don't know what this was used for. We do, however, have beams that were placed into the original rock structure here, and we can date those and find out when this particular room was built. This is the kiva. The kiva is the central religious ceremonial site of any pueblo, and as you can see, this particular pueblo had a large and square-shaped kiva made out of all different sizes of rocks. Absolutely a fascinating structure. And the bench that I'm sitting on must have seated up to, possibly 200 people at any given time, thus giving rise to speculation that this particular site may have been a religious meeting center for various groups of prehistoric people from throughout the region. This entire region was very rich in its prehistoric population. It's speculated that there were as many people living in this valley 700 years ago as there are now. The kiva itself is interesting in that it has a hearth in the middle, a large plaza area here. This would have been a fire pit, probably. We don't know. We haven't dug that, and some kind of a feature at the entranceway here that we don't quite understand yet. But this is where the religious ceremonies of the tribe or the social group were held, we believe. And obviously, by its size, shape, the amount of time that went into building this, not to mention the fact that it was covered over by ponderosa logs carried from the forest 5 miles away, all of these are pieces of evidence that this is a very important place for the people that lived here. Its size is kind of difficult to gauge until you stand right up against the wall. It's a tough site to photograph, but as you get up against the wall, you realize that it's really quite large. This would be 7 or 8 feet tall on the outside. We believe that the wall may have been as high as 14 feet originally. It's been reconstructed by our team of archaeologists to this level because this is what we can find and what we're real sure of. An absolutely wonderful piece of architecture, though. And in the cracks in the walls, we don't believe that this had mortar in it. That we believe this is all dry laid. And in these cracks, we find various artifacts, potsherds, and so forth.
You're standing inside the religious kiva. This is the largest Mogollon kiva known. You can see these walls here. This wall back here, this was original. We believe the walls were at least 2 to 3 feet taller and roofed at one time. We'll know more when we do some test excavations in here. This bench that you see along here, the individuals used to sit on, and the bench over on this side is quite a bit wider, and we believe that's where the religious elders held their council. The bench itself is an Anasazi influence. The step-down, combination step-down wind deflector over here is also an Anasazi influence. The sloped ramp entryway is a Mogollon characteristic, as is the rectangular nature of the structure itself. We will be doing some test excavations in here. We hope to find some post holes, the support beam post holes, probably ponderosa pine. We believe the Indians dismantled this structure, at least the roof, and certainly this wall back here was just all dismantled rubble when we first started digging. We believe they dismantled it so that the incoming Indians couldn't reuse the structure easily and gain the karma that had been accrued since the original structure was built. We haven't done much digging since we've had the volunteers. Mostly working in this, reconstructing this structure right here. And that just involves bending over and picking up the rocks. Chris and I are usually the ones that place them in position. But yeah, it's mostly on the job. And the screening, you just have to have a good eye. And once you know what to look for, a couple days, a couple weeks, you get really good at it. You can spot them right away. Especially the points, projectile points. They're very shiny.
What they making them out with all the? They don't have flint around here, do they?
No, what they had was chert, and they had obsidian. And the blades really stand out in the screen because the dirt doesn't adhere to the edges. Just not porous, a very clean surface. So they really stand out. And then the potsherds, you got to develop an eye for that. The crystals really stand out because they don't hold any dirt either. Very clean.
Onyx?
No, haven't found any of that.
I mean, what kind of crystal is it?
Oh, crystal. It's just crystal. Quartz.
Quartz
crystal. Yep. And especially obsidian really stands out. There's obsidian glass, volcanic glass.
Oh, yeah.
And the shell beads, they stand out pretty good too. But the pottery's hard to find. Oh, in the area here in Springerville, and certainly in Greer, which is quite a resort area up in the mountains, there's a great abundance of lodging right on Main Street. Right across from the museum, there's a couple of hotels. Right down from the museum, also, there's a restaurant, kitty corner from the museum. We had 2 days ago, there was an Indian individual from India. He owns one of the lodges in town. He brought like 30 or 40 people from India up here, from Bombay area. And he's a motel owner. Today, a motel owner from Greer, the resort area, stopped in. He has several cabins up there, and he's going to be giving tours, bringing people into the museum and down to the site from his establishment. So there's plenty of lodging up here. There's good fishing. The restaurants are great, and there's plenty to see up in this area. Quite a few other ruins in this area.
How's the temperature?
The weather, the winds are going to start dying down here in another week or so. The temps get up to in the 80s and once in a while 90, but you don't have the humidity up here, and at night it drops down in the 60s, so it's very comfortable sleeping at night. What you're in right now is true for the almost the entire site. The site is honeycombed with these type cave systems formed by the falling basalt rock. Some of them are quite extensive. Some run back 30, 40, 50, 100 yards back in, 10 feet wide. It's quite a maze, the entire site. The Indians of old utilized some of these caves for burials. But the one you're in right now is not a burial cave. This is just an example of what you'd find throughout the site, subterranean.
A few people have carried the vision of this project for the last several years and have really understood what the value and the worth of the project is to the community. I'd like to introduce one of those people at this time, Mayor Dennis Silva.
Thank you, Gordon. We, with the town of Springerville, and I as mayor, certainly am pleased to be here with you tonight talking about our newest, we consider, find in our community, the Casa's Malpais archaeological site. There's been a tremendous amount of publicity, both locally, statewide, nationally, and we're happy to say internationally, about the significance of this site. As you may or may not know, the site is probably the only site which has catacombs in the United States. We, in the town of Springerville, along with all the agencies that are helping us coordinate this process of excavation, are very, very sensitive to the idea that the catacombs need to be protected. They, in fact, will be sealed, and there will be no entry into those because of their sacred significance. We are making every effort possible to coordinate with the Indian tribes in our state, and again, all of these state appropriate agencies, to make sure that the excavation of the site is done under the tightest constraints and under the most quality process that we can possibly come forward with. Just to give you a little bit of background about how the whole process occurred, the caves were in fact at the site for many, many years. We as children, and I am a native of the area, as are my parents, played in these caves when we were growing up as small children. To us, the caves, in fact, were nothing more than that, just caves. There was no knowledge at that time that there was any significance as an Indian ruin. It's interesting in retrospect now, after the archaeological process that's gone forth, to find out how we were not knowledgeable about that as we were growing up. It appears that in the basalt caverns, one of the things that had happened is that there were wood trusses that were over the caverns, and they were covered with mud and with rock, and in fact made an enclosed area, and as they deteriorated, they fell in and covered and protected a lot of the artifacts and other things that were on the ground level. Well, obviously, over the years, it became more like a floor, and so the areas that we were playing in with as kids were truly just caves. We also had an opportunity as we were growing up to see like the giant kiva, but again in our area in Springerville and the surrounding Apache County area, we're exposed to a lot of Indian ruins, and so again we had seen that there were some here, but we're not aware of the significance of how large an area this was. We had an opportunity then in 1957 to have a fellow by the name of Mr. Danson, who used to run the Northern Arizona Museum in Flagstaff, come into our area and do a study of the area. And again, he was the first person to realize what the significance of it was and had it classified as a National Historic Site. So in 1957, that was done. Really, there was not much done from that period on, other than the classification of it. It sits on state land, Arizona state land, and so we approached the governor's office about 8 years ago to see if we could not get our site, Casa Malpais, designated as a state park in the state of Arizona. There was a lot of interest by the governor at that time to do that. However, our state, like many other states, is having financial difficulty, and so there was not adequate money. So instead of our site, there was another site picked to be the site that was going to be the state park. We then, the town of Springerville, decided that one of the things we needed to do was explore what options we had in our community to develop existing assets that were available to our community and to the surrounding area. And with the support and assistance from the Economic Development Committee, Gordon, and the commission members, they designated and determined that one of the areas that we should explore and look into was the Casas Malpais National Historic Register area, and see really what the significance of this site was and what its potential for development was. The city of Springerville then basically went forth and generated the seed money to put together the first grant to hire an archaeologist, a professional archaeologist and firm, to come in and to do a test of the site and see what its potential for future development would be. When we were able to do that and secure the firm, we hired Mr. Hoffman, and basically John Hoffman and his firm went forth and started a preliminary excavation of the site. I think to all of our surprise, we found that the site far exceeded any expectation that any of us had. Here we were dealing with a site that had national prominence, was one of a kind, was probably one of the major finds in the United States, and in fact now it's being stated that it may very well be the only site in the United States, and maybe even on the continent, that has catacombs, and definitely is one of the significant Mogollon tribe sites. Obviously, everything's in the very preliminary stages, and it has now been determined, at least preliminarily, that there may have been as many as 800 Mogollon Indians that lived on the site. It also appears that it may have been a regional site where other tribes from within the outer areas came in for trading. Again, none of those things have been validated. We continue to explore it, realizing that we've actually actively been excavating the site for only maybe 6 or 8 months, and again with very limited funds. One of the things we as a community are very proud of is the fact that we think we're handling this project and the total excavation and development of it with the utmost of concern for both the Native Americans, for the past tribes that lived there, and also for the future people that may come and visit it, because we think with its history and its significance that there may be a lot of you out there that might want to visit it, as well as many other people. And we, from the town of Springerville, would like to invite you to come and share it with us and with the archaeological group and with the Native Americans who we're involving, because we think it's something that can be shared not only locally and statewide, but nationally and internationally. And again, we would invite you to come out and spend a day, 2 days, a week, and some of you that may be interested, maybe even get involved. One of the things we've talked to with the archaeologist about doing is actually having volunteers come into our area, train as training archaeologists or training helpers, and then go out on the site and spend a week assisting us, so that it really becomes a part not only of our community but of our nation. And so we do extend a sincere invitation to any of you that may have any interest to call either our Economic Development Office or to call our Chamber of Commerce, call the Mayor's office, and we extend that invitation at any time to try to accommodate tours or even a practical experience to have you assist us in the excavation process. Obviously, in a project like this, where we have a small community like ours, funding is always a big issue. We are presently trying to secure grants. We are funding a lot of it with local hard city dollars, but to excavate and to do it right for a site of about 15 to 17 acres is an expensive process. Will probably cost over $500,000, of which now we're sitting somewhere in the vicinity of maybe $100,000. So again, if any of you are so inclined, we would certainly appreciate any contribution from $1 to anything that you would feel, because I think that makes us all a part of this process. So again, I would like to thank you for having the opportunity to come before you, and it is certainly a national site, and we extend that invitation.
Okay, here we are at these particular digs. You know, it feels like home here. I'm going to have Mike in a moment fan out down over the river bottom, the Little Colorado. I want you to note my little fire pit. The family quite comfortable in here, safe and secure. We could do our cooking here. I can see a piece of charcoal right here where I sit. What an excellent job the archaeologists have done on this particular dig. But I like to think about the people. 800 of them found this to be home. Whatever their religion was, they found the key to the place to worship. But this is right down to home here. This is no doubt occupied by one family. And in the wintertime, this fire, no doubt, keeping them warm. And you could have the security of home here. So what was it like to that family? Probably a lot like your family. The mother loved the children. The father was proud of his sons. And when a father is proud of his sons, it doesn't matter how long ago it was, we still have a family located. A family that no doubt marriage was involved. But I'm going to have Mike expand down in the bottom, and I want you to visualize people working that bottom down by the Little Colorado. And yep, this was home. This was it. How secure. And always remember this, wherever you are or whatever year it is home. And a place that a heritage can be kept. A place that a heritage can be secured. A place that in America we still have people that take pride in what they do. Again, I thank the archaeologists for the wonderful job they have done on restoring this particular dig. And again, you can have the opportunity of taking part in it too. So, yep, this is home sweet home, the home of a family. I hope that you have enjoyed the little visit here in our living room. And, you know, I wonder, many might think, well, this looks very primitive. But my dear friends, who is really primitive? Those that did not have to worry about drugs and those that did not have to worry about gang wars, basically. Maybe a little contention every once in a while. Have we progressed or regressed? Who knows? It's something we should think about. Hope you've enjoyed your visit here in these people's home many hundreds of years ago, but you can almost feel their presence to know, yeah, welcome, this is home.
From this spot, we can notice how the geology of the area is formed. The slab, the detached flake here, is really a big piece of columnar basalt. And all over the site, you have huge blocks of basalt that have fallen down from the mesa and fallen on top of each other and formed fissures and caves and crevices and cracks and all sorts of interesting features. I'm going to walk across the bottom of this hidden slump valley here and show you a feature that we're quite proud of. This is what we call the spiral staircase. Well, it's not quite a true spiral, but as I disappear behind the rock here, you can see that it is indeed a staircase. Along the ground here are laid rocks that have been brought in and formed in the shape of a staircase that allow people to get all the way up to the top of the mesa, which, as you can see from the surrounding cliffs, isn't that easy a thing to do. Follow me. As you can see, in the side of the rocks here are several natural crevices and fissures that have been hollowed out even further over years of use. You can see that some of these have been actually wood. And they were used to stabilize oneself climbing up the staircase. At the top, and from here we get a beautiful panoramic view of the entire valley. Well, we got together today to talk about how the community is going to be involved in this project and how we're going to proceed with the stabilization and excavation at this time. Where are we at on that, John?
Okay, well, we're moving right along. We're on course. In particular, what's going to be fascinating is in the next several months we're going to be teaching the local community members about archaeology. We formed part of the statewide amateur group, as we know, and we have over 100 members right now in town. And beginning in 2 weeks, we're going to begin offering courses in basic archaeological techniques, and allowing our students who are our community members to help work with the archaeologists on the site. so that not only will they learn about archaeology and how we take care of sites and take care of the complex that we're working with, but we're going to have an opportunity for them to have a hands-on experience in helping develop the site. So the community is participating not only in general support, but actually hands-on work, but they're going to have part of themselves into the development part.
That's great.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. And then we were talking about getting some of the equipment up there. Sam?
Yes, next week or so when you get ready, we'll go ahead and get the water and go up there so that you can go ahead and start the construction of some of the mud that you want up there.
Great.
Go ahead and have the crews out there, go ahead and get the equipment up there for you. It'll be, like I said, sometime next week.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll be able to get some big barrels for the water up there and the mixtures that we need for the stabilization. Because as you'll remember, what we're trying to do is go in from the rooms that we do open up, and those are only the rooms that have been vandalized in the past that we've worked. The rest of the rooms are leaving intact. What we're going to do is go in then and stabilize the rooms, that is, protect the walls from weathering once we've exposed them through careful excavation. So that material will be really useful. We need to do it before the monsoons hit out here.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll be moving right on as soon as you get ready for it. We'll have the crew in there.
Do we know any more about cattle guards at this point?
Last I talked to Tuffy with the county, he said he was going to go ahead and look about getting those for us. Great. He'll be back the first part next week, and I'll go ahead and meet up with him and go ahead and make sure we can get out there.
How many volunteers do we have right now?
Right now, we have over 100 that attend our monthly meetings at the session. And in terms of actively working, like almost every day of the week, we have an average of about 45 to 50 who are coming in at some part of the program.
That last meeting was absolutely fantastic. We had this whole place out here filled up.
Yeah, it was amazing. It
was amazing.
The only group that's larger is Phoenix, which is the state capital. That's pretty remarkable to have that much participation. Going back to the cattle guards, Gordon and I just had a meeting a little while ago this afternoon. American Fence Company is going to donate 3 gates to the project so that we can have gates also that are swing gates instead of the pole barbed wire fences. And that will be a big help. And that they'll be bringing up, I believe, at the end of this week, so that while we're still working on the cattle guards, we'll at least have good fences out there.
Right, but that'd be for security closure too.
For security, yeah. And it's going to help a lot with the security issue. Yeah. So that was real nice. They'll just donate that to us.
Okay, that's great.
So that will help a great deal with the security out there.
Now, John, are they flagging the perimeter of that by making a survey, or is there anything currently going on with that?
Yeah, what we did is we worked about a month ago with the city engineer to look at the exact boundary lines that we wanted to flag in. At this date, and we have a rough flagging of that area for us to work with. And at this point, probably what would be good is for all of us to get together out there and actually walk the line together. Now, I know you guys have been working on the property issues. I believe, last week, the week before, we were doing some property issue work. What we ought to do now is go out there together and put in a solid flag line of the area that we really want to define as the proper boundaries for the park development in that section. I mean, around that one end of the sign. I think that'd be helpful if we all did that together, because we all have different perspectives we can bring to bear on, what we want done and why do we need it here, and, that kind of thing. I think we're right at that stage where if we could do that, maybe even, Thursday morning or something.
We've been talking about stabilization of the site and park development. How are our volunteers involved in the museum and the curation?
They play a critical role for us. To allow the professionals to be on site and help monitor, our amateurs have been very, very helpful in terms of greeting guests coming in the museum, registering them, giving them the flyers, showing them how to get to the site to visit while we're working on it, helping with donations. They've been taking donations and t-shirts. We've been selling t-shirts and stuff to help support the program, especially the security aspect. Played a vital role in that. It's been just wonderful to see that type of community support, and hopefully that'll be continuing. Of course, my guess is once we offer classes, we'll have a lot of people that want to be studying as opposed to just manning counters. But there's enough members, I know, in fact, who already approached me and said, we're very interested in the program, but we don't have the physical attributes anymore to be climbing up and down the mesa. And that they really would like to be working in the laboratory and working in the museum. And the nice thing about our program is you can actually see the laboratory, of course, as you're visiting, and people who are working in the lab can easily step up and help man the counter. So they don't just have to stand by a counter and wait when people are coming, but they can actually be doing lab work and showing them how to sort the artifacts and protect those as well. The archaeology of Casa Malpais is perhaps some of the most fascinating I've seen in all my explorations of the American Southwest. In particular, the architectural components of the site are just fascinating. The Pueblo complex, the Great Kiva, how the stones have been shaped and fitted to carry the weight loads, to create the structures, just remarkable. The focus of our program have in fact been preserving and protecting the site. That the archaeological work that we're doing is to repair vandalism that has occurred in the last 100 years, and at the same time open up the site for public visitation and interpretation, so that people can actually come to learn not only about people of the past, but also how we do archaeology. Why do we have to take the time that we do? Why do we try and protect sites? And how do we come to learn about people? The differences that different groups of people have had through time, and also the similarities that we as human beings have shared through time. And so we feel that the visits to Casa Malpais teach you not only about the past and about how we do archaeology, but also teach you something about yourself. And so it's one of the more exciting and dynamic park development programs that we're doing in archaeology, I think, in this country. And I think that the archaeology is probably one of the most fascinating things that people can come and experience and see, especially when we begin to look at the Great Kiva, and especially when we begin to look at the Pueblo, the enclosing walls, the spiral staircases, the rock art, all the many different components that go to make this ancient city of the past.
If you would like to come to Springerville and see the site of Casa Malpais and visit the museum and see what the archaeologists are finding and doing, please feel free to write or phone. The museum is located in Springerville at 318 East Main Street, or please feel free to telephone at area code 602-333-5375. We hope to see you. Thank you.